Speaker, I just want to remind you that we have a Q&A, and really I'm dying to hear what you have to ask. There are little cards in your package, so if you have any questions, please write them down and pass them to the end of the aisle, and there will be someone who will pass it on to us. So the third speaker is Gary Lawrence. He's an urban strategist leader for Arup International, the global consulting and engineering firm.
With your permission, I'll just stay seated and save the time of the walk back and forth. And also, I'm lazy. Arup is a company of about 10,500 people. We have 89 offices in 41 countries. And we have approximately 2,000 people in China, in our Beijing, Shanghai, Shenzhen, and Hong Kong offices. And while the design community largely has heard of Arup, many of you probably have not, but you'll see the products of our work in the Olympic Games. We were the engineers on the Olympic Stadium, on the swimming stadium, on the expansion of the airport, on the Chinese Central Television Tower, and a variety of other projects. So we're fairly well known in that regard. I want to talk about this whole issue of sustainable design and sustainable development, and in response to a question that Calvin posed in a note to we panelists around the question about whether sustainable development is an oxymoron or not. First, I wanted to focus, and I only have 3 points to make, but I can go on for hours on each point, so, but I won't. For Arup, what is sustainability? What is sustainable development? Well, for us, it's about optimizing conditions for human development over time, which is really the only legitimate purpose of the human endeavor. And all the things we do are means toward that end, we hope. Sustainability requires Sustainability is an analytical framework and a decision-making tool. Requires you to think about issues in depth, and we're very good about thinking about issues in depth. The scientific community going deep on issues. My wife is a molecular biologist who, over dinner when I'm home and she's home at the same time, tells me stories about her day in genetic engineering, and I have a Pavlovian response to that. I nod at certain words because I don't have a clue what she does, but she can go real deep on molecules. We also have to focus on breadth, how things are broadly spaced, how they interact with one another. And we have to think about time. Sustainability is about not only the past, but the future and how things move through time. And the question, the real legitimate and the really hard question about whether the future is actually a constituent of present-day decisions or not. We oftentimes say it is, but we never, or very seldom, act as though the future is a constituent of the present-day decisions. But most critically, it's about the intersections of issues. As you're thinking about development, how do you actually leverage improvements in more than one system at a time? And sustainability is largely about those kinds of questions. And we find that the only way to get at that is through a concept called integrated design. And Arup was founded 60 years ago on the foundation, on the need to do integrated design. The notion that no single discipline has the expertise, has the information, has the tools necessary to solve the problems in a complex world. And sustainability and an approach to that is about how to get at that in complexity. Now, this begs the question of who's a designer? In the days when we're actually trying to solve some of humanity's greatest problems, the problems of climate change, the problems of poverty, the problems of food shortages, the problems of water shortages, who is a designer? And it has typically been the parlance of the design community that designers are architects and engineers and landscape architects. In order to do sustainable design, you have to really broaden the number of people at the table up front. And these aren't hierarchical sorts of things. It isn't the architect doing the design and then telling the engineer to make it stand up, and then the structural engineer telling the mechanical engineer make the pipes fit, those sorts of things. It's everybody at the table up front, because unless you define the question appropriately, you can't come up with better answers and it's the better answers that we need in a sustainable world. So in Arup, we actually have psychologists, we have economists, we have MBAs, we have artists, we have cultural anthropologists, in addition to our engineers and our planners and our architects. And we bring them all to the table at the same time up front in order to get these questions defined appropriately, because otherwise you can't really make progress. The urban ecologists, they do a life cycle starting with conceptual design or problem identification, conceptual design, go through to end of life and disposal. And their view, and it's something we hold dearly, is that every step after problem definition, when you try to apply the idea of sustainability, you double the cost and reduce in half the effectiveness of what you're doing that. So you really have to focus up front. The reason that we have psychologists and sociologists and that sort of thing is we find that in order to get at this question of sustainability, it's a political idea with technical attributes. It's not a technical idea with political consequences. And I don't mean partisan when I say political. I mean small p political, the people's struggles for their hearts and minds, their desires, those sorts of things. And we find that, and this is odd for an engineering firm, I know, but we find that unless we're focusing on issues like nostalgia and fear and aspiration when we're thinking about projects and solutions, we can never come up with solutions that work. People won't own the outcome unless we're incorporating those ideas in it. Last thing, I'd just talk about one particular project. We have a project, one of 9 master plans we're currently doing in China called Dongtan. Dongtan is on Chongmen Island at the mouth of the Yangtze River. And our client is Shanghai Industrial Investment Corporation. It's a new town being developed for 500,000 people by 2050. And it's an ecological city. And if you want to know more about that project, you can go to www.arup.com and just put in a search for Dongtan. And I'm not going to go into detail on that. What I am going to talk about is why the Chinese government, why the premier of China went to London to meet with our chairman and looked him in the eye and say, Dongtan will be the world's most ecological city when it's done. It wasn't a suggestion. And there are a number of reasons why that's true, but I want to talk about just one of them. I mean, there's the air quality issues, those sorts of things. A big part of the Dongtan story is water. Dongtan is in the Yangtze River Basin. The Yangtze is fed by a number of sources, but most critically it's fed by snow melt and glacial melt from the Himalayas. 40% of the world's population relies on water from the Himalayas. India, Russia, most of Southeast Asia, and much of the Yangtze River Valley. And now Beijing is relying on that as well, as China digs 3 new canals to connect the Yangtze with Beijing to move water there because of the droughts in the north and the east. Unless we can find ways to reduce water consumption, raw water consumption, then there will be a huge political, and this is big P, political destabilization throughout all of Asia. And the lack of water, lack of potable water, the lack of reliable water supply is going to hit and perhaps constrain economies and create unrest and probably military unrest far before the consequences of climate change and temperature and those sorts of things hit. So there are a number of strategic reasons why the idea of sustainable development are necessary that go far beyond the 100-year future of rising temperatures. We're engaged in these issues in Russia, in Africa, and around the world. We're engaged in them most heavily in China. We're incredibly impressed by what's going on in China. Of our staff, 2,000 plus people, 97% are Chinese nationals working in a firm to solve problems, and our expectation is that between 10 and 15 years from now, China will actually own the world's high-end environmental technology marketplace. Because from a strategic point of view, they have no choice, and unlike the US, they recognize they have no choice. And so we're really hopeful. That's not to say we don't understand the depth of the problems, but from our perspective, only the integrated design approach to the human environment can at least help solve some of the most critical issues up front. Thank you.